So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Dora, and thank you for all those who keep joining us. I see so many faces that I have seen on events before. It's very nice to have you here with us. And if you are joining us for the first time, then also I will just give you a very brief introduction about Qesher, which is a project that we founded together with Sebastian about 4 years ago, and our aim is to introduce different Jewish communities from around the world. Today's session is a bit particular. It's not our usual event, because normally we focus on the full history, the culture, and the present day situation, which we're going to do later this week in the case of Krakow. So you probably all have seen that we are doing a three-part series about the Jews of Krakow. So today it's a little taster, a teaser to learn about the Jews of Krakow, in which we will visit virtually the famous Jewish Krakow festival, which happened in the end of June. So it's a very, very recent event. And on Thursday and Sunday, you can learn also with Olga, who I will introduce in a moment, about the Jewish history and also present day situation of the Jews of Krakow in Poland. I'm just going to introduce Olga very briefly, and then of course she will also say a few more words about herself. So Olga Bokonovskaya is originally from Odessa, but currently lives in between Berlin and Krakow. Some of you may have seen her talk about Berlin in June that we also featured. She's the founder of Your Jewish Heritage Guide, and she escaped Ukraine and Odessa because of the war in Ukraine. And while she continues giving virtual tours of Odessa, she now creates live, virtual, and in-person cultural and historic tours of many destinations of Europe, mostly focusing on Poland and Germany. So I'm very glad to welcome her back. And Olga, the floor is all yours. She will give a presentation about the festival today. She will also share a few words about her in-person tours that she does in Poland and Germany, and then we will open up for Q&A.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for joining us today for this special event. I thought that it would be interesting to share to give a small talk about the annual Jewish Culture Festival. And I have two festival brochures before I show you the film about the festival with my live commentary. These are the two brochures of the annual Jewish Culture Festival, which is held pretty much at the same time during the year, throughout each year. It starts at the end of June and goes on for about a week. They start advertising this festival half a year in advance. And it's organized actually not by any of the 6 Jewish communities of Krakow, but by a group of people. And initially it was a small one-day exhibition. So a Krakow-born Jew who, as a kid, that's a little bit of an intro story into the festival and its organizers. So he was born in Krakow. As a kid, he immigrated together with his family. But then in 1980s, during the last period of the communist era, he returned to Krakow and decided to organize a one-day exhibition talking about the Jewish heritage of the place, of his home country, of his home city. And why did he decide to do that? Because basically by 1970s, most of the Jews had left Krakow. That happened during the communist era. And during the communist times, nobody really talked about the Jewish heritage of this place. So he was the first one. And he started with a small exhibition, and it became quite successful. And eventually it evolved into a 7-day festival, which is held annually. And this day, this is the brochure, they organized the 33rd annual Jewish Culture Festival, which lasted for 10 days. And during that festival, he gave a talk he is still in charge of the organizing committee. And during the festival, he gave a talk in which he explained that it was a very challenging task for him and decision for him to actually go ahead with this festival. Because when he was thinking of the festival, he was in Jerusalem, and it was October last year, and the war in Israel started. And at first, he was basically heartbroken because of the war. And secondly, he started thinking about whether it would be necessary and how safe it would be to organize this festival in Krakow. Then he gave it a thought for a couple of days, and he decided to go ahead with the planning. The only thing which they usually have and which did not happen this year was a big open air concert which starts in the evening and goes until midnight on the main square of the Old Jewish Quarter. For safety reasons, they decided not to do it, but otherwise, there were about 80 events. So this whole program is just one page. Lists just few of the events, but there were 80 of them, including the talks, discussions, a few concerts, seminars, and very interesting meetings. So I'm gonna show you a brief film and give you my live commentary. And at some points I will stop and give you a more extended commentary. And hopefully this film will give you an insight into this very interesting event, which is regarded as one of the biggest Jewish festivals in the world. So let's get going. So it started on Friday with the event which was called Shabbat by the River.
Shabbat Shalom, hey! Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, hey! Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
The event was free to attend. It was located on the venue on the ground floor of the cultural center. Well, that's the river. And the performer who you've just heard is Maria K. And she presented a concert of contemporary, original, and adapted Yiddish song. And that concert lasted for about 2 hours. They served free wine, and that was an unofficial opening, the Shabbat by the river. That's how it was called. And this is the view of the beautiful Wisla River, which flows through Krakow and separates the city into 2 parts. On the right bank is the former Jewish district quarter of Krakow, known as Kazimierz, and on the left bank is another historic neighborhood called Podgórze, which was turned by the Nazis into the Jewish ghetto. And we're going to visit both districts during our pre-recorded tours this week. So let's continue. We're now in Kazimierz, a historic neighborhood of Krakow. Once a year, during the festival, the old Jewish quarter of Kazimierz becomes an open-air venue of the festival. We're now on the old Jewish street, Ulica Żydowska, that's how it was called. In 1490s, the Jews of Krakow were ordered to leave Krakow and to settle here in Kazimierz, which at that time was an independent town. And for centuries, they were living here. And during this festival, the old Jewish quarter becomes something like an open-air venue of this festival. We're now looking at the old synagogue, the most important synagogue of the Krakow Jews for centuries. According to the historians, the first building of the old synagogue was built around 1410. Then it was remodeled into this one in the 1500s. In the old days, the only entrance gate into the Jewish quarter was here. And during the annual Jewish Culture Festival, this spot becomes an open-air venue of the free events, concerts, seminars, talks, discussions. Everybody is free to attend. The festival targets those people who have Jewish heritage, those who are local, and the visitors. These posters decorate the outer wall of the office of the organizers. And that was actually the gathering point of the tours held during the festival. And everybody could pick up a program from there. And each festival has a topic. The topic of this year was Shema. The organizers are supported by the city council, by the Israeli consulate in Krakow, by the Polish airlines, and by a whole bunch of foundations, which were established by mostly by the American Jews with roots in Poland and in Krakow. And this tent was an open-air venue of the events. So we are now inside of the old Jewish quarter. This is Mr. Taube, who founded the Taube Foundation. He was born in Krakow suburbs prior to the Second World War. His father was a businessman, and according to this man, he had a very good gut feeling, both in business and in life. And that gut feeling saved the family during the Second World War. Right before the outbreak of the Second World War, the parents embarked on a journey to the United States. They first took a train from Poland to France, then crossed the English Channel, boarded Queen Mary in England, and sailed to New York. And once in New York, they basically announced to the family that they were not coming back and asked the family member to bring him, their son, to the United States. Then from New York, they moved to Los Angeles. He graduated, that's him in his childhood. He graduated from Stanford with MS, and then got into the real estate and became a co-manager of a very big textile business, which belonged to the Jew who originally immigrated from the Russian Empire. And that's the Queen Mary ship, which his parents boarded to leave England and to move to New York. And that's him with his uncle on the train heading to England. And the Second World War started just a few months after they managed to immigrate. That's him with his sister, or with his cousin. When the war finished, when the war ended, his parents returned to Poland, not returned, they came on a visit, looking for the family members. And the only family member they managed to find was this girl, their niece. And they knew that she had been hidden by her parents in a convent. And actually quite a few Polish kids survived the war being hidden in the convents by the nuns. So they found her there, adopted her, and brought her back with them to the United States. And they grew up together. And then when he became a successful businessman, Tadeusz, the last name escaped my mind, I will remember it. So he founded a foundation to support a non-for-profit fund to support the Jews who were immigrating to the United States from America. And then when the communist regime collapsed, he started supporting different Jewish projects in Poland. He became one of the major donors. That's him to the left, with another Jewish immigrant. He lived in the Russian Empire. Together, they built a very successful textile business. So he became one of the major donors of the Warsaw Jewish Museum. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. And he became one of the major supporters of the Galicia Jewish Museum, founded in Krakow in 2003, and one of the major backers of this Jewish Culture Festival in Krakow. So mostly the festival is supported by the private donors. And that's just one of the stories of the financial supporters of this event.
This week for me, this weekend is the
on the first day,
when I first stepped foot.
And the first day was actually 23rd of June. The first event was basically a thank you event, saying thank you to the Poles, non-Jews, who helped preserve the Jewish heritage, mainly in Krakow, in the region of Krakow, and in Galicia. In the 1800s, when Poland was partitioned among the neighbors, Krakow and its region Galicia became included into the Austrian Empire, and Krakow was one of the main cities of Galicia. So this man is an American businessman who in 1990s established another foundation, non-for-profit fund, to support different initiatives and projects to preserve Jewish heritage in Krakow, to establish the Jewish Galicia Museum, and to support the initiatives to preserve Jewish heritage in Galicia. So on this event,
these kinds of projects at a time when it wasn't so popular. In fact, sometimes it created negative responses. And as I met person after person, I discovered that they did not know one another, that they thought they were acting all on their own. And I soon began to realize that not only was that true, but that I was, every trip back to Israel or to the States, I was hearing people saying some of the old, stiff. Thank you.
So he was explaining how he came up with an idea to establish his non-for-profit fund to support different initiatives to preserve Jewish heritage in Krakow and in Galicia. Then he was followed by the head of the JCC in Krakow. And the JCC of Krakow is one of the most active Jewish communities.
What an honor to be here. Also thankful for the simultaneous translation. Thank you for that. I'm inspired by my friend Michael. This is a visionary. This idea of honoring people may seem automatic and obvious today, but that's only because he had this idea 27 years ago to begin doing it. Also want to acknowledge our warm cooperation with the Galicia Jewish Museum and congratulate them on 20 years. The JCC, we're a few years behind and looking toward our 20th as well. I want to thank you for what you're doing in terms of Jewish heritage, but not only. I want to thank you for something that I don't know if you realize that you are doing. And that is creating an environment here in Poland that allows the rebirth of Jewish life. Not only an appreciation of Jewish culture, which itself is very important, and not only a respect for Jewish heritage, which is of course, as we understand, Polish heritage as well. But through your actions all across Poland, you are helping create an environment that allows organizations like ours to do what it's doing, which means trying to find Poles that have Jewish roots and welcome them back into the fold. And this is happening in tremendous numbers. The Polish Jewish community is one of the few in the world that is growing organically. It is one of the safest, easiest, and best places in the world to be Jewish today. And that's quite an accomplishment anywhere, considering what the landscape of the Jewish world and anti-Semitism looks like today, and even more miraculous when we understand that for the Jewish people 80 years ago, this was the worst place to be on earth. So through your actions of caring for Jewish heritage all across Poland, these people that are finding out, these young people, teenagers, who find out that they have a Jewish parent or a Jewish grandparent.
And I thought that this speech was important because it answers the questions about how safe it is to be Jewish today, how things are in Poland today, and it's a good intro into this initiative. So the event was attended by the representatives of the different Jewish communities, by the event organizers, by the locals, and by those Poles who were awarded during this event. And you can see them standing there with special awards. And they are men and women who live in Krakow and in small towns, who are Polish, non-Jews, and who carried out different projects, restoring cemeteries, restoring synagogues, doing research connected to the places where they live. Here are the ceremonies nominated. And this ceremony happens every time, every time during the festival, during every festival. And the event took place in the Galicia Jewish Museum, which was one of the main festival's venues. They held a lot of talks there, presentations of the books. This is the Galicia Jewish Museum from the outside, which was founded by two Brits in the early 2000s, in 2003. Both have Jewish roots in Poland. One was a quite known photographer, and he started this project by traveling around Galicia and Krakow region and taking photographs of the Jewish heritage. And then he was supported by another Brit who was more of a historian and a researcher and a professor of an Oxford University. And now he's a member of the UNESCO organization, which is responsible for preserving Jewish heritage. They found an old warehouse, got permission from the city council to turn it into the Galicia Jewish Museum. So, and the museum was opened. One of the events which was held in this museum during the festival was the talk about Renia Spiegel. And you can see her here on the poster. She was a Jewish girl born in Galicia before the Second World War. She grew up in Galicia. When the war started, she was in Przemysl. And Przemysl is a small town located on the border between East Poland and West Ukraine. The war separated the family. She was living there together with her grandparents. And when the war started, she started writing her diary. During the first year of the occupation in 1939, she fell in love with a young man. He was also Jewish. He hid her in the attic of the friend's house. But unfortunately, she was uncovered there and shot by the Nazis. But the same man kept her diary. And after the war, gave her diary to her sister, who managed to survive. So the diary can be now found on audible.com. And during this event, the researchers of the Galicia Jewish Museum presented a special digital exhibition. They made a series of cartoons based on her diary for children. They presented a special small exhibition which will be traveling around different places of Poland, talking about Renia Spiegel and her diary. To leave something to the world. That's how the exhibition was called, Renia Spiegel. Her diary is available on audible.com. And if you're interested, perhaps I can share with you links by email to the 8 small cartoons, which were made by the researchers of that museum based on her diary. And this whole project was supported by the American consulate here in Krakow. So we're now inside the Galicia Jewish Museum. While attending the festival and different events, people got to see this exhibition, which talks about the preserved and destroyed Jewish heritage. Outside the festival, the museum is open daily. You can buy a ticket and see the exhibits, the displays. These are the Jewish sites located around Galicia. So a highlight of the festival are the music concerts, which are held every day. 1 or 2 concerts were held every evening, and this old tram depot served as the concert venue. A ticket cost about 30 euro. And the objective of the festival is to present not only traditional klezmer music, but to present Jewish music from different parts of the world. So among the performers were the groups from the bands from Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, a band from Israel, from New York, local performers. And those musical concerts is what the festival is really known for. And we're now inside the old tram depot, getting ready to listen to a short clip, to see a short clip from the performance. It was a very special concert held inside the old synagogue. It was called Bach music, Sebastian Bach, in the old synagogue, and it started at 11 p.m. and the tickets were sold out like 3 weeks before the start of the festival. 3 weeks prior to the event. And we are now inside. And now we're at the front of the synagogue. Yep, and we're now in the front of the synagogue. That's Kazimish, the old Jewish quarter by night. And we're gonna explore it during the day with the tour, which is scheduled for Thursday, I believe. And you can see it yourselves that it was rather safe being in Kazimish at that time. And that's students from the schools of North America on a school trip. And that was Friday, another Friday night in Kazimish. And we're back to the festival's tent. This open square, open air venue on one of the main squares of the old Jewish quarter. It was very hot, about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is the organizer and the visionary of this festival. So it was his idea to organize a one-day exhibition in late 1980s. And here during this talk, he explains to the audience, to everybody who was willing to attend it, how he was thinking and speculating and really debating whether it was worth and made sense to organize this festival this year. How he was in Jerusalem when the war started, and what he saw from the windows of his hotel room, and how he basically came up to this idea to still have this festival despite of all the risks. Now we're at the workshop. So that's a workshop, which, here's another workshop. This is a cantor from New York. And now it's a workshop. A few workshops. This one was held by a cantor from New York on Yiddish singing and dancing. There was another workshop which was organized by the performers from Tunisia. And you see how many people attended despite the heat. So this festival. And this was, in my opinion, the highlight of the event. Sitting in the middle is the only Holocaust survivor still living in Krakow from the Schindler's List. Her name is Nusa Horowitz. She was born in 1932 in Krakow. Her whole family, her parents, her brother, and herself worked for Schindler in his factory here. And all of them, although during the last month of the war, each of them ended up in a different location, having their own survival story, but they survived thanks to Oskar Schindler. During the festival each year, the organizers schedule presentations of different books, which are written either about the Holocaust survivors or about the Jewish history of Krakow or about the war history of Krakow. So, and this was a presentation of one of the books, which was written by the journalist. The journalist is that woman, blonde woman wearing glasses. She knows Nusa, who is in the middle, for a long time. And based on the talks and interviews, she wrote another book about her. And during the festival, they presented that book, and Nusa Horowitz gave an interview during which she explained, briefly talked about how they lived in the ghetto, how the whole family managed to survive. And when the Nazis were closing the ghetto, they transferred the Jewish forced laborers to the Plaszow concentration camp, which was established in the Krakow suburbs. Oskar Schindler managed to get some of his workers living in the barracks next to the factory, which were turned into something like a small ghetto. She and her mother were there. Her brother and her father ended up being sent to the concentration camp. And they ended up being in 2 different concentration camps. Her brother managed to survive in Auschwitz. Her father survived in Mauthausen. And at first, they didn't know that they survived. When the war ended, she and her mother were sitting in the Krakow movie theater, waiting for a movie to start. And before the start of the movie, they were showing a newsreel, like a small advertisement, announcement. In that newsreel, they saw a boy who looked exactly like the son and the brother. And they started searching for them, and they found him. Then she explained how she worked as a hairdresser after the war, and then how she ended up being a consultant on the set of Steven Spielberg's film, Schindler's List. Although at first she was absolutely reluctant to do that, because she and many Holocaust survivors, they didn't want to talk about what they had gone through during the war. In general, people started talking about that only in the 80s and then in the 90s. But she was a consultant, the main consultant of Spielberg in that movie. So born in 1932. And they had a half an hour, 30-minute gathering about the book, and Nusa shared her memories. So that's the only living Holocaust survivor from Spielberg, from Schindler's List, still alive, living in Krakow. So another book presented during the festival was dedicated to the Jewish lawyers and attorneys. And we're now actually in the small movie theater at the Schindler's Factory, which was another venue of the festival. And that's the author of the book who talks about his research and about the fact that quite a lot of prominent lawyers in Krakow prior to the war were the Jews. And that's one of the rooms of the Schindler's Factory with the city map. A research was presented about the Jewish schools and Jewish education system in Krakow prior to the Second World War. And that's a photograph of one of the Jewish classrooms. And that brick building is actually one of the Jewish public schools, which was built in Kazimish in the early 1900s. And during the festival, they have a lot of tours in English, in Polish, and in Ukrainian language, which talks about the Jewish heritage of Krakow. And now we started this video with the Shabbat by the river. This is the second Friday and the second Shabbat service, which was held inside the Jewish Galicia Museum by the Reformed community. In anticipation of your possible questions, there are 344 Jews living in Krakow and 6 communities, 2 Orthodox, Chabad, Reformed, the newly established Jewish community called the Friends of Jerusalem, which consists of 7 members. This service was held, organized by the Reformed community. The service. By the Reformed community. And following the Shabbat service, there was an evening concert performed by a group from Israel. And it was a free concert. And at that cheder stall, one could get kosher drinks and snacks. And that's me saying thank you. About virtually attending the annual Jewish Culture Festival. I hope I gave you some idea of the festival, a very concise one. 82 events about history, culture, traditions, local history, political talks. During the last day, the festival was attended by the Israeli Consulate General in Poland, and he usually comes during this festival, attends this festival every year.
Thank you so much, Olga, for sharing with us virtually this festival. It was really wonderful to almost be there. And before we get into questions, do you want to share just a few words about your work as a tour guide in Poland and in Germany?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Of course, I'll be happy to. So, as Dora said, originally I'm from Odessa. In 2011, I founded my tour agency with a focus on the Odessa Jewish tours. As many of you probably know, Odessa has an amazing Jewish heritage and an immense Jewish heritage. And I was running that tour agency until 2022. And then I moved to European Union, to Berlin, and to Krakow. And at first I hoped to be able to return, and then I realized that there's no end to the war. And I wanted to continue working, and I wanted to continue guiding. So I established my tour agency called Your Jewish Heritage Guide, oneword.com. That's the website. And because I divide my time between Berlin and Krakow, I first focused on doing online tours in Berlin and in Krakow, and then I started traveling and learning more using my background, and my learning and research brought me to Bavaria, Regensburg, and Nuremberg, and we're going to be growing. And when I was thinking about how to best utilize my experience and leverage my experience and my knowledge, and when I was researching the history and building the tours, I thought that it would be quite interesting not only to tell the local history of a Jewish community, for example, in Krakow, in Berlin, in Regensburg, but also to build connections. Because in the past, we know that there were a lot of migrations. At first, the Jews settled in Central Europe. Then they were expelled from Central Europe during the Black Death in the 1300s. Poland was open and encouraged the Jews to settle, and many of them settled in Poland, and Krakow was the capital. For example, a lot of Jews from Regensburg, from Bavaria, came here because they had commercial partnerships with the local Jews. They knew the area, so they moved to Krakow when they were expelled from Bavaria. And then in the 1700s, when the Polish kingdom started to decline, a lot of them moved back to Germany, and the German rulers started to allow the Jews to settle in different German regions. And it's fascinating. And then a lot of Galicia Jews migrated or relocated to, for example, Odessa. We had a lot of Galicia Jews there. And for me, it was very interesting to uncover those connections and to present to our guests a more integrated or comprehensive idea of the Ashkenazi Jews living in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think we succeeded building our tours around that. And I started first doing in-person tours. I continued doing online tours all this time when I'm here. And last year, I started doing in-person tours and continued doing them this year. So Jewish heritage, general history, because everything is interconnected. And I love exploring those connections.
Thank you. And if someone is interested to learn about Jewish Krakow more in detail, we'll have a two-part series with Olga on Thursday and Sunday. We will share these links with you tomorrow in our follow-up email. We'll also share the recording of this talk and some other information that might be relevant. And I'm going to read some questions that came in. You did answer many of the questions that came in, so I'm just telling everyone that I apologize if I don't read out your questions, but I'll try to focus on the ones that haven't been answered. And you did mention briefly about safety, but can you comment a bit more about how was the security this year? How did they deal with it technically? How was there any security to enter events? Like, were there any protests or any
no, there were no protests.
Or
there were no protests, and being like very straightforward and open. Poland, unlike a lot of countries in Western and Central Europe, has a very small, at least Krakow, and other smaller Polish cities. I cannot speak for Warsaw, the capital, but Krakow and other small cities have very small Muslim communities. And of course, that makes things a little bit more open and friendly and easier. And it was easier for organizers to make this decision about this festival. There were no protests. The security during that during those open air events, which were held in the tent, for example, last year there were 2 security guards. And when the Israeli consul, general consul, ambassador, not general consul, ambassador, attended, he would usually come with his 2 bodyguards. Well, this year, there were 4 of them, and they were just standing along the perimeter, but they never checked any bags or anything. And in general, I mean, there were no even loud talks. So it was very safe. But to be on the safe side, the organizers decided not to have this late evening, almost night, open air, many-hour concert on that big square, which you saw during the film, and you're going to see them. You're going to see that if you, hopefully you'll join us. You're going to see that during our pre-recorded video tours, that huge square in front of the old synagogue, previous years was packed with people attending those evening concerts and late night concerts. And this year, for safety reasons, they decided not to do it. But other than that, the things were normal. And yes, JCC is very active in Krakow. It's not, as I said, 344 Jews, 6 communities. And the community in general is not really homogeneous. For example, last December, the Hanukkah menorah was finally placed by the municipal government and not by any of the communities. And JCC, yes, is very active. It's very supportive of Ukrainian refugees. It's very open and caters to people of different ages and helps a lot of Poles discover their Jewish roots, but they're oftentimes not really well perceived by other Jewish communities, to be honest. But that's how Jewish life is in Krakow. So,
thank you. Can you give a little bit of technical details? How many people attend the festival? What percentage are they Polish, Jewish, or Polish or other Jewish US? And also
I got it. I think compared to last year, this year, the festival was not that well attended by international guests. Last year, I saw many more guests from Israel. Well, for obvious reasons, people are people who live in Israel travel this year less. I heard a lot of by the speech, quite a lot of guests from the United States, from England, a few from France and from Belgium, and oftentimes during those workshops, those who performed during the workshops, they asked people where they came from. And there were families from California, and there were quite a lot of Jews from New York, from the East Coast, but just a few people from Israel. It's well attended not by the Poles, but by people who live in Krakow, especially those who live in Kazimierz. Yeah.
So it's very local, very nice.
Yeah, it's very local, and you can see that people try to attend those workshops, and they put an effort into learning how to sing, and how to dance, and for them it's good fun. And what was not part of the film, and that's also interesting, in the evenings on several days, the organizers held jam sessions for young people in a nightclub in Kazimierz, because they tried to engage young people who are in their 20s, and at least to get them familiar with the Jewish history and Jewish culture, not only in Krakow, but worldwide.
Thank you. And some other technical questions. Where do people stay? Is it easy to find a place to stay? And how much is the cost of the sessions to attend?
Evening concerts are almost all of them were ticketed. And the ticket cost around $35 €25, which is roughly about $40. That's just for the evening concert. There were quite fancy dinners, several dinners, Greek Jewish food, Jewish Greek food, Jewish Italian food, and something else. I didn't attend because for me that was way too expensive. A ticket cost €60. And they target foreign guests. And they were held in a nice restaurant in Kazimierz, very well organized, but that's probably these are the most expensive tickets. Yep.
Thank you. There is a question about the organizer of the festival. Someone wrote that, as far as he knows, that Janusz,
Yeah.
is not Jewish, and he made his life work to reestablish Jewish life in Krakow. Can you comment about that?
As far as I know, and what he shared, he is Jewish.
Okay.
He is Jewish. Yes, it's his commitment to reestablish Jewish life in Krakow. They every year in March they organize I don't know if a procession, a parade is not a proper word. A march. Yeah, thank you. A march on the date of the liquidation of Krakow, of Krakow's ghetto. And that's the march which is organized by the festivals committee, by Janusz. It starts on the former main square of the ghetto, of the former ghetto. And this year it was a special event because on that date, they also opened the memorial in the Plaszow concentration camp, former area of the concentration camp. And it was also attended by the Israeli ambassador, by the municipal government, by the reps of the Polish government. But the march is organized by the same people who organize, and he has an office and about 4 people, I think, permanent staff, or maybe 5 people, and a lot of volunteers, a lot of young people volunteer. Yep.
Thank you. Do you know if any of the tours or sessions have sign language for the deaf?
I've never seen that. I would say no.
Okay, thank you. What is the title of the book about Nusia Horowitz?
It's not translated into English. They just released it and it's in Polish.
Okay. So maybe one day it will be.
Maybe one day, yep.
And there are many comments. I'm not reading them, but many comments congratulating you on this wonderful session. So please feel free later to look into the comment section. You already shared about the current population. Yes, I'm just trying to see if there are any questions that haven't been answered yet at all. But also I want to remind everyone that we'll have 2 in-depth talks about Krakow, so hopefully those will answer any questions that may be left. What you mentioned an old synagogue. Was that called Remashul?
No, Remashul is a different synagogue, and we're gonna see it during the tour.
Okay. Yeah, that was also answered. Okay. Is there any place where people can listen to chants from the synagogue? Like, are there recordings about that?
No, I would say no. There is recordings from the synagogue.
Or if there is during the festival, if there is a live opportunity to listen to, are there services? Are there?
No, because the Reformed community, which organized the Shabbat, the second Shabbat service, they are part of this festival, but other communities are not. You can attend the service, for example, at the Remo Orthodox Synagogue, but you need to get on the list of the attendees, but they are not part of the festival. But when you are attending the festival, you can attend the service at the Remo Synagogue, but that's separate.
Okay, thank you. So I hope I went through most of the questions, but hopefully you will be able also to rewatch this recording. So hopefully that will help you to answer some of the questions that may have been left. And also we hope to see you on Thursday. We will do the first part, which will focus on the Old Jewish Quarter and the golden age of Krakow Jews. And on Sunday, on the 28th, we will have the second part, which will focus on the ghetto era and also the revival of Jewish life since World War II and what happened since then. So these will be the two sessions with Olga coming up this week. And I will just read one last question, that the cultural events during the festival, are they mostly in English or Polish, or what is the main language?
Some are either in English or in Polish, but there is translation. Polish is the main language of the events. But in many cases, you can have an audio thing and get a synchronic translation. Some smaller events, for example, all of the events which were organized on the premises of JCC, including that interview with Nusa Horowitz, they were in Polish only, unfortunately, because I think that a lot of international visitors would be very interested, to attend that event with Nusa Horowitz. Maybe they didn't want them to be overcrowded because it can get really overwhelming for the elderly presenters. I don't know, but some of the events are in Polish only.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olga, and thank you everyone for joining us today. You will hear from us tomorrow. We will send out this recording and also some further information. And we hope to see you soon on Thursday and Sunday if you decide to join us for the Krakow events. So thank you everyone, and have a wonderful rest of the day, or good night for those in Europe or Israel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.